Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. How do you know that you're right? How do you know if you're seeing things right? The story of Jesus healing a man who is blind in John 9 raises a lot of questions about the filters that we use to judge people and determine what's right and wrong. In challenging times, it's important to develop practices that help us stay grounded and help us check our filters. And that includes seeking out additional perspectives and remaining humble. The story of Jesus healing this man on the Sabbath unfolds almost like a movie plot, a forbidden miracle, followed by threatening interrogations, family members drawn in to testify against the man healed. But the man who now sees stands strong as he is thrown out of the community, while Jesus turns the judgment back on those who have judged wrongly. Like last week, this is, again, another long story, and I just want to simply focus on some key items. The first relates to the image of seeing versus not seeing, light versus darkness. And I'm reminded of the first chapter of John's Gospel when he announces the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. Throughout the story, we begin to understand that the man who is blind was actually the one able to see all along. And it's the religious legal experts that are blind. It's an embodiment of what Helen Keller, who was blind from a young age, once said: the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. Those same experts maintain certainty of their judgments. The man repeatedly states that Jesus opened his eyes and is a prophet, but he also admits what he doesn't know. I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. And his parents say, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Acknowledging what you don't know at critical moments is humble and can actually be a sign that you see things more clearly and precisely. During Lent, we've been using a time for confession and forgiveness together at the start of the service. It might not be the most exciting part of a worship service for everyone, but humble self-reflection and admission of what we do and fail to do is a foundational element of the Christian life, and I think a human life. Especially when it accompanies the reminder of God's love, it can become a source of renewal and an opportunity to receive forgiveness. When we don't pause for self-reflection and acknowledge that our own vision and actions may be compromised, we can become misguided. Clearly, the religious legal experts in the story are certain they are right and justified in punishing the man for his support of Jesus' actions on the Sabbath. How often do bad things happen at the hands of people who are certain they are right and never stop to consider another perspective? In his book, Seculosity, David Zoll notes that several studies of online behavior suggest that the angrier we get on a particular subject, the less likely we are to be right about it. This doesn't mean that all anger is misguided or uninformed, of course. Some anger is justified, but here's something to try perhaps in the coming week. If you find yourself getting more and more angry about something, take that as a sign to stop and ask some deeper questions. Why am I angry? Is it related to something within yourself? If you're angry about a situation or experience, give more thought to why that happened. Is there more to the story than you know? Are you open to hearing another perspective? If it's a person that you're angry with, think more about why that person said or did something. It's possible that they are terrible, but perhaps there's more to the story. Maybe they're a human being like you. Maybe you're largely right, but maybe the person or situation has something to teach you anyway. Maybe there's a perspective you've not seen that you need to account for. The religious experts were angry by healing on the Sabbath and breaking the Sabbath law in their eyes. Jesus threatens what they've inherited. Jesus threatens the religious purity laws that they oversee and are experts in. It certainly threatens their authority, but let's give them some credit. I have no doubts that they saw the laws regarding Sabbath as fundamental to faith. Violating those created a moral and spiritual dilemma for the community. Jesus heals by mixing his spit with dirt. He creates mud, and this is reminiscent of the creation story in Genesis 2, in which God makes Adam from the dust of the earth. On a very technical level, this act of mushing spit with dirt together is equivalent to kneading, which is an important thing to say because that was one of the 39 forbidden tasks on the Sabbath, according to Jewish law. The commandment to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy is general, and it opened up questions of what precisely this meant. Traditionally, this meant, of course, refraining from work, and there were many smaller laws that further clarified this. So Jesus is violating this from their perspective. There were even laws, as many of you know, in the United States that kept stores closed on Sundays for similar reasons. The Sabbath provided laborers rest, so it could even be a justice issue as you think about Sabbath law. And this isn't the only place that Jesus contradicts laws surrounding the Sabbath. In another story, he says that the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. So to serve a rule to remain holy rather than serve a person was not right in the eyes of Jesus. This is an example of how Jesus frees us to discern what's best and love our neighbors. Theologian Ted Peters says, once we realize that we can get out of the business of justifying ourselves, the world suddenly looks different. No longer do we need to defend ourselves from a hostile world by identifying ourselves with what is good or just or true. We can live in the world. We can love the world as if it is our world, with or without the lines we draw between good and evil. So this is a radical reimagining of what the religious leaders were familiar with. It's not a surprise that they were angry with Jesus, in a sense, and the whole situation. Whether they were right or not is another question. But I want to acknowledge that this and other stories in John's Gospel and elsewhere often leave a lingering portrayal of the Jews, as our reading identifies them, as something akin to enemies. First, there's nothing unique about anyone abusing any amount of power or authority in any era or land, or for simply trying to enforce what they see as legitimate laws in place for the good of the whole. We just so happen to have a story recorded from a period of time where there was tension between Jesus, who is Jewish, caught in a sort of family tension with Jewish leaders. I've had the privilege of getting to know rabbis from nearby synagogues in a couple of my churches over the years, and I've really appreciated their insights and found some great shared perspectives on matters of faith and scripture. I've valued those conversations and relationships. Jewish synagogues and citizens in our country face continued threats, so I want to extend my own respect and support as our Jewish neighbors prepare for the Passover in coming weeks. Again, for anyone who would harbor hatred toward Jewish people on the basis of their beliefs or practices or heritage, coming out of passages like this really should have a moment of self-evaluation and seek additional transformation and renewed heart and mind. This and other stories, if you understand them, though, are leading to a crisis point. There's a real question emerging from the religious leaders as John's gospel unfolds as to whether Jesus is truly of God or not. This is the question that the religious experts will ask even more directly in the coming chapter. Either he's someone who violates various spiritual laws and is therefore a blasphemer and opposed to God, or he truly is the Son of God, the Messiah. So who's right? What filter are you using? At the end of today's story, the man born blind argues with the religious experts in defense of Jesus. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. It's at this point that they drive him out. He's cast out of their community, put out of the synagogue. And just as a reminder, to be thrown out of the synagogue would be to be thrown out of the community entirely. Everyone was connected to that. You would now be a loner. But Jesus hears this and he finds the man. He says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." The man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. He places his belief in the one who offers grace and healing rather than those who cast him out and seek to shame him. To the best of our ability, may we be people who offer grace and mercy out of our own humility, whether that is nurtured through ongoing self-reflection or imposed by life circumstance. And may you too see the divine truth and love of the Messiah, who has offered his love and grace to you. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.